Welcome to another episode of the Employee Advocacy and Influence podcast. In today's episode, we're joined by Melissa Heidmiller, Manager of Brand Marketing at Procore Technologies, and this one is packed with practical insights, especially if you're building an employee advocacy program from the ground up. We talked about how Melissa transitioned from an employer branding focus into the world of employee advocacy and how Procore is shifting from simply having a platform to building a true program with engagement, empowerment, and impact at its core. We discussed why starting small and being intentional with content curation matters and how Melissa got stakeholders excited using early data wins, which is all essential stuff for anyone who's about to launch a program. We also discussed what's working and what isn't when it comes to getting employees involved and why regionally tailored content is the next big step for Procore's advocacy journey. Melissa also shared a great example of how they used advocacy to boost engagement around Procore's flagship event called Groundbreak, and how she's framing advocacy as a tool for personal branding and not just corporate communications. So whether you're starting a program from scratch or looking to scale, there are some seriously actionable ideas in this one. So without further ado, let's get into the episode. Right, so Melissa, just starting right at the beginning, would you just be able to tell us a little bit about your role?
Absolutely. So I am a manager of brand marketing on our brand advocacy team at Procore Technologies. I originally started off at Procore in an employer branding function where I was more focused on supporting TA and looking at how are we communicating externally to our talent audience. And over the course of time, my role has grown to incorporate employee advocacy. So now I'm focusing more on how our employees overall talking about their experiences at Procore and the impact of Procore, talking to all of our audiences and not just our talent audience.
Marvelous. Yeah, I mean, the next thing I wanted to ask was what led Procore to explore employee advocacy. I will still ask you that question, but I think I can see here from the role background. But what was it that led you to start exploring an initiative like this?
Sure. So previously, we've had employee advocacy at Procore, but it wasn't really much of a program. It was more of a, here, we have a platform. So over the past, I'll say over the past year, maybe more than that, we've really had to focus more on paying attention to the power of the individual voice of the employee and really wanted to find ways that we can amplify that and really take advantage of that shift in that overall shift in the market of the trust in the individual over the grand corporation. So that's what brought us here.
I think it's a really natural journey as well, with the sort of TA element of things always seems to be a place a lot of people start because it's logical, right? Hey, well, we've got all these vacancies, we've got all these job ads. Can people just talk about them more? Can we, so many companies do referral bonuses and things like that. It's a very natural step in that direction. Then when you realize it works, everybody goes, well, actually, there's a lot of other things we could start to use this for. And people suddenly come out the woodwork, suddenly have different campaigns, different ideas that they really want to utilize that for. So it's nice to see that kind of pattern still kind of continually. That's been going on for years from my experience of all of this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. I think that from the talent side, in working with TA, but also with employees in general, getting them to talk about Procore in a way that is outside of how your typical marketing team talks about the company, right? Because it's always very focused to, let's talk about the product or the service or whatever it is that your company does. Let's talk about the benefit to our customer, as opposed to talking about what's career development look like here? How do we build community within our organization? How do we support each other? How do we grow and how do we learn? Which, while it's great for talent to be learning that, it's also amazing for stakeholders and investors and customers as well to have that information, because it's building that trust and appreciation for the people that are behind the product or the service.
Yeah, it's got a lot more authenticity, I think, as well. It's the big element. When you do see, and it depends who starts an advocacy program at times at businesses. We work with all sorts of businesses, shapes and sizes, different stakeholders. But when you have that, we're coming at this from an authenticity standpoint of, hey, we just want to talk about who we are, what the kind of belief is within the business, the ethos of it, and everything around that is much nicer and much more engaging typically than, hey, we've got a new product, buy it please as quickly as possible. Like, it's a much more softer conversation to kind of build a brand from that perspective. I get the use case from sales massively, and it's huge, but at the same time, you need that subset of employee engagement content that's going to kind of really speak to not only your audience, but the employees actually want to talk about it as well.
Mm-hmm.
And Melissa, how would you describe the current stage of the program at Procore?
So I feel like we're more in the awareness phase with the program. As I mentioned, before, we had a platform and it was kind of like, here's the platform. But now that we're building out programming and looking at ways to engage our stakeholders and employees, we're really more, hey, guess what we've got? And here's some interesting facts about it. Kind of that spot. We've definitely got, resources in place already that people can be tapping into, but it's that driving them there. So I like to think maybe we're just a couple steps past the beginning.
It's an exciting time for sure. And I know you've been using benchmarking to guide your strategy as well. What insights were you hoping to gain there?
Yeah, so with the benchmarking, I mean, it's when it comes to data, I definitely have to admit it's not the first thing that I think about. I'm more of the, I love the creativity and let's just spark ideas and run with them. So I always have to force myself to like, well, let's go look and see what things are. So for the most part, up to now, what I've been looking at is how many active employees do we have on LinkedIn? How is that increasing? And looking at it from whether it's a year-over-year aspect or whether it's a month-over-month aspect, which, thanks to you guys, I get that lovely email every month that gives me a nice percentage that I can go to. But then also looking at our employee social sharing platform, looking at what's the uptake on how many people are joining, how many active users do we have in that on that platform as well. And then also looking at, can I draw any correlation between the performance of our corporate social account performance to any increases with employee activities online?
I think that's such a fun part of it. To be perfectly honest, I'm probably the opposite, where I really find the data side of things really interesting and want to look for the kind of correlations. I probably drive Lewis mental with spreadsheets and things like that I produce. But I think that the sales and the recruiting and the efficacy, I guess, is the best way to describe it. Like, what is working for the business? What content is performing? I think that's a really nice, if I had a recommendation, it's a really nice place to start to look at. That did very well based on the performance metrics that you perhaps have versus this did less well. What are these two things? Why did this one do better? Who shared this one? Who didn't? So on and so forth. Those are really nice starting blocks to where you can start to be more strategic with the content that you push. And I think what a lot of people don't realize is just because something performs really well on your corporate page does not in any way, shape, or form mean it will perform well in an advocacy program. And we see this time and time again. Vacancies, job postings are a real typical one. They are fine on a corporate page. They can sometimes do well, but they're pretty kind of mediocre. In an advocacy program, they often are enormous drivers of traffic, essentially. And that's a really big one for us. We also, into the nitty gritty of it, we start to look at kind of things that we would call kind of dark social. So looking at likes and impressions and reach, and those sort of more marketing figures are great. Those are really nice to understand. But actually, how much traffic did this drive to the website? And what you'll see in a lot of cases is somebody might have 200 likes on a LinkedIn post, which is phenomenal. And visually, that's great. And anecdotally, that's great. We can, hey, look at this post that this person's done. They've gone viral. What you can see on the sort of back end of this is how many people clicked on the article itself, how many people went to the website off the back of that. And that can often be in the thousands. I know I do it on LinkedIn a lot. I'll read something, I won't press like, even though I've gone and read the article in great detail and disappeared off into the internet, but I won't have actually liked that post. But they've driven a lot of impression and a lot of activity out of me from that article. So I think I could talk about this for hours, but looking at that kind of deep-seated data and understanding where do people go and why do they go there, that's what I would really recommend as kind of the phase 2 for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that makes complete sense, right? Like when we've had this, we've had our new employee social sharing platform just since the beginning of January, and previous to that, I didn't have any ownership into the prior platform, so it's all new to me. So part of the stage that I'm in right now is figuring out what's the content that our employees want and trying to determine not just what goes in there, but who are the people that should be putting the content in there, right? So is it the company news pieces? Is it the culture pieces? Is it the industry pieces? What is it? What do people want? What's the purpose for sharing it? And what's actually going to perform?
Yeah, I think what's really interesting as well about what you were saying before, Elliot, about the being able to look at social media metrics, but then actually digging in and seeing how much traffic that post is actually driving. I find that can go both ways as well. Like I can look at, I use this to champion our own employee advocacy program. People might feel like they're not making an impact, but just being able to dig in and, jump into analytics and say, actually, like you might have only had, 10 reactions on your post, but you actually drove 5 engaged sessions on our website. So there's always value to be gained there. But I guess it is just having a tool just kind of allows you to look under the hood in that regard. But Melissa, taking a step back, I love that you mentioned the newsletter because that's something that's immensely popular with our audiences and subscribers to that newsletter. But the data that you get in there, how has that data helped with internal conversations or stakeholder buy-in?
Well, we have right now we've got a lot of leaders that are they're very interested, and they're like, we need something to sink our teeth into, and give us some programming ideas. Give us what do you have for us, right? So at this point, being able to say to them, well, this is what we have in existence. This is the ROI on it. Here are some examples of positive outcomes, and give them that data. That's great. But then we're still also in that stage of we're building as we go. So it's like, okay, so here's the things that we know that are going well. So what if we take this and what if we try it this way? Would your team be willing to test it out for us? And that's where it starts getting a little bit fuzzy because they're like, well, maybe that sounds like a little bit of a risk or a chance, or I don't know if we can invest that time in it when we don't have the proof yet that it's working. And it's the sell of, well, if you give it a shot, if we give this a shot, then I can figure out if it's working so that when I go to the next group, I can say this worked and here's my evidence. And I'm hoping down the line, that's where all that data payoff is really going to come in for me once we have a few more things established. But other aspects, being able to look at other external resources for data. LinkedIn in general has been a really good resource for us. I went through the LinkedIn for Executive Communicators program a while back and was able to pull out really good data points from that just to funnel towards particular teams that were there working on building up their individual brands as thought leaders, where I could take those pieces and say, hey, look at this evidence. Why don't you try adjusting your strategy in this way? And seeing them pick that up and move forward with it and seeing their success with it. So that's been pretty cool.
I think you're in a really nice position, to be perfectly honest. I speak to a lot of people, they're still trying to get the buy-in from the stakeholders in any way, shape or form. The people that wouldn't know their LinkedIn password if you ask them, those sort of people that are struggling with just the concept of social media. It's the fact that you've got a load of senior stakeholders that are going, how do I optimize this? I'm doing it, but I don't want to burn my own sort of personal resource. How do I get better at it? How do I be more efficient? How do I, get higher level results? That's an amazing place to be with that team. And I think what you're doing there with those metrics is a really nice way to be able to do it as well, to highlight, hey, this is what's worked in the past. This is why this is important. Kind of really hammering that piece of things home. Another one particularly for senior stakeholders that I see that often goes down very well from that kind of anecdotal third-party evidence is the defensive mechanism to all of this. When you look at how you're performing against your industry and your competitors, if your competitors are talking about innovation and all of the things that they're doing and all of the amazing work that they've achieved, that is drawing the eye of your current customers. And that's a really interesting dynamic that a lot of people don't think about. They see it as, how do I win new business with this? But there's also how do I retain all the business I have from that brand element and that authenticity element by showing, hey, we're really good at what we do. And this is why people come to us, and really affirming that belief with a lot of customers as well.
Quick break from the episode to let you know about a free resource we think you'll love. It's called Employee Advocacy 101 Cheat Codes, a short book written by Disseminate's founder, Bradley Keenan. If you're looking to launch or scale your employee advocacy program, this book is packed with actionable insights, hard-won lessons, and yes, real cheat codes to help you shortcut the learning curve. And best of all, it's completely free. Just hit the link in the show notes to request your copy. All right, back to the show. Melissa, you mentioned a moment ago about the fact that you needed to showcase the value to get other teams involved. And often, it's something we've heard time and time again. It makes it difficult to get things off the ground as a result of that. But once you have that spark and that first round of results, it becomes so much easier. But obviously, you mentioned you're in the early stages. So what tactics have helped you encourage employees to get involved so far?
Yeah, I've been going at it from a couple angles. So I'm really not just pushing how are you talking about Procore, but more from the aspect of how are you talking about your work and how that helps your personal brand in your career. So really driving the what's in it for me aspect with employees, right? Because I don't want to just go to them and say, hey, we're expecting you to be active on your socials and talk about our company, because then they're gonna be like, oh, great, yeah, I'd love to do that. No way, that's not gonna fly, right? So instead, it's really, really encouraging them and educating people to understand the value of, if you are active in this regard, and I mean, it comes down to where they are in, like, what's their role type, right? So if they're in sales, then it's looking at how does this help you drive sales? If they're in customer success, how is this helping you retaining customers and getting renewals? If you're in any other sort of the business, then, it's more of the, how are you elevating yourself as that person of value, and having that knowledge in your industry and in your particular profession. How is that helping and supporting you move forward in what your career aspirations are? So that's been a really nice lead-in for us, going from that aspect. And then when we switched over to our new employee social sharing platform, rather than taking all of the 1,000-odd people that were on that platform, we only took the people who were active, right? So that was a much smaller percentage, but we took them and we put them onto the new platform and kind of gave them a little bit more of that VIP white glove experience with, like, ooh, you guys get to be the first people on this platform, and you get to have that experience right from the get-go before anybody else does, and making them feel that they're being recognized for the efforts that they had been putting in thus far. And then, of course, targeting people who are already in general active on their socials, not just with our tools, but independently, who's out there building their brands and really engaging with their audiences.
I think that those are such a good group to kind of target, right? It's the low-hanging fruit in a sense, and it's not the best way to describe it, because it seems like it's like easy, but it's not. But the low-hanging fruit, the people that are already active, it's sort of like, hey, can you just do this in here? Because then we can track it and we can attribute and we can understand what's working. An area that I think can be really beneficial, particularly just in your industry, in the world that you're living in, for sales and CS teams, implementing this as part of an onboarding strategy is something I see quite a lot. Is that something that you've done currently?
Yes. So right now we have a fantastic onboarding program, if I might say so. In that program, we have content dedicated to one, to learning about the brand of Procore, so kind of the brand, overall brand education and enablement. And then we also have that brand advocacy aspect of, what's in it, what it is and what's in it for you kind of aspect is rolled into that. And then where I'm trying to take that a step further then is looking at, okay, so now that we have our company onboarding, what's your role onboarding look like, and making sure that it's woven into that. I know that with sales, in the past, it was very much incorporated, but with our platform change, we've lost some of those resources. So now it's working with our enablement teams to get that new content created that aligns with the new platform, to now have that reintegrated again into their, not just their onboarding, but their overall everyday process.
Yeah, I think it's so good for particularly new sales teams. It's an area that I've spoken a lot in the past with a lot of different clients. That ramp up time for a new account executive, they're new to the business, they want to start selling stuff. They don't really, if we're being transparent, know a lot about the business at that point in time, or even the product. But being able to get them hit the ground running, and here's a platform that you can use that means you can start talking about this as an industry expert off the bat, makes such a big difference to those AEs. It means they're reading it, they're actually engaging, they're educating themselves about the business, hopefully as well, but they can at least come across as industry experts very quickly because all their stuff's ready and waiting for them. So that's a really nice thing to hear, that that's kind of in place as well across the business.
Yeah, I really love the fact that you're actually focusing on communicating the employee benefits as well. It's something that we speak about all the time in our, in our content is, well, actually, do you know what? Bradley Keenan, our CEO, summarized it really well in his book. It was just it's a chapter just called "Don't Make It All About You." And I think people need to hear that. But then sometimes people get that right, but then when employees land in a platform and they go to look for content to share, it's all overly promotional content. So it's almost like they've been hoodwinked. It's like, okay, we've made it seem like this is something for you, and now we just want you to share promotional content. Obviously, there's a conversation to be had about balancing content types, but are there certain content types you've noticed that your employees prefer to share?
Yeah, I mean, I know that our employees definitely want the variety of content to share. They're asking for more industry news. They're asking for more culture content, and not just the company and the product content, which I will admit right now is what the majority of the content is in there.
One of the little tricks that we use in our platform, and it's kind of built into our platform, is this has been suggested by. So there's a nice little kind of notation element to say, here's an article that Lewis suggested into the platform about digital marketing. And that stands out. So it really highlights that individual as the one that found this, and they're the kind of expert, and everybody's sharing their kind of find, essentially. That's a really nice way to do it, from my perspective. The way you can basically just shout people out for saying, hey, X found this, and it's really, really impactful. People should be talking about this. The other really nice piece of content I've seen, just as a general thing, particularly talking about that onboarding strategy, I've seen a lot of clients previously, and this is a little bit of an engagement bait system on LinkedIn, but when people join a business and they say, hey, I'm so happy to be working at Procore, and there's a picture of a hat and a laptop and those sort of things, I've seen placeholder versions of that be created as well, which are a really fun way to be able to go, hey, this is your first post, to kind of break the ice for people posting onto LinkedIn for the first time. So it's a cheap trick in its own right, because it gets lots of engagement and it's very easy to do, but a fun one if you're trying to get those kind of initial people on board.
Mm-hmm. That is a fun idea.
Melissa, I know we're still in the early days, and I appreciate you sharing, all of especially the engagement tactics, because the ways that you're getting employees involved. I think it's nice for us to be able to share these actionable tips, because I think this is stuff that other businesses and listeners can apply to their programs. But what wins are you most proud of so far? And I'm very aware that we're still early into the program, so that might be a tough question right now.
No, that's okay. I've got one. So our annual conference called Groundbreak, last year it happened in November, and I would say that the programming that I put in place leading up to the event would be my most proud moment for that. So in the weeks leading up, essentially building out a drip campaign internally to engage and inspire employees to get active, and not just to, yay, this conference is happening, but really getting them to share their stories. So if they had attended the conference in the past, getting them to share, some reflective pieces on, maybe favorite moments, or what is it that they're looking forward to this time, or we're a global company and many of us are remote. So can we be talking about how exciting it is to be able to go to this conference and see so many of our fellow employees that we don't get to see in person, or, meeting up with customers, whatnot. So just really driving that and seeing the uptick on our socials of employees that were following with that advice and positioning the conference in that way. And then during the actual conference, the way that they were talking about it, and after doing those post recap posts as well, was really cool. A post event, the results of our share of voice, it just like blew out of the water from previous years. And that came obviously, yes, from employees posting, but also from our customers posting as well. But it was just really fantastic to see that incredible uptick of action happening on socials.
Am I right in saying this is your, did we have a client once upon a time that had is there an anecdote around promoting in-person events via employee advocacy?
So I think I know what Lewis is referencing, which is a client of ours that drove, I think earlier on, this was initially like a webinar that they were driving to. So they were pushing employees to share, hey, can you just encourage people to sign up for this webinar? And they had about 800 people sign up to a webinar, and previously it only had about 40 people sign up to it. And not a small business by any means, but they just drove so much traffic through their advocacy program of people driving, hey, there's this kind of webinar. And then they parlayed that kind of into events as well. And they just found they've got so many kind of field salespeople, people that are out there talking to people, that they were just driving all of this foot traffic basically in front of them, going to these events and things like that, saying, hey, I'm going to be at X event, I'm going to be at CEX this year, wherever it might be that people are going to be going. It was a really, really nice way for them to be able to drive that traffic and ultimately direct sales off the back of it all. So that will be nice, that you'll be able to highlight the effects of what you achieved last year. Hey, we got all these amazing results. This year, we're actually going to make this into a bigger campaign, and it's going to be a pre-event and a post-event, and you'll be able to drive traffic and show the results of that as well.
Melissa, have you faced any surprising challenges along the way so far? Because I feel like that can be just as valuable for people to hear as, successful tactics.
Sure. I would say that I have two challenges, and I don't know if I would really say that they're surprising, but two that stand out to me. One of them is this one is more the reminder, is that what I consider to be ROI is not necessarily what someone else considers to be ROI, right? So when I'm taking the impact and the data of something and bringing it to a stakeholder, I'm like, wow, look at this is amazing. They're like, yeah, that doesn't matter to me. So always just keeping in mind what's the influential piece that's going to work with someone else, and they're not necessarily going to care what you care about. So always knowing your audience when you're trying to get the buy-in. And then the other is the time commitment. I just was not prepared for the time commitment that this is taking to set up. And it's the learning how to reprioritize your work to really get it focused and get this all set up.
Melissa, what advice would you give someone starting from scratch?
I would say start small is the best way to go. Don't set unrealistic expectations for yourself. Figure out those reasonable goals. Take the time to learn from what you're doing. It's always okay to pivot and to adjust. It's always okay to throw something out the window. And also just to be an example yourself, right? So if you're asking people to do these things, to be putting themselves out there, to be communicating about the company and their area of expertise, then you should be doing it too. Because if, they're going to turn and say, well, why aren't you doing it? And you're going to give them all the same excuses that they're going to give you, right? So just be the positive beacon.
That is, something that we see all too often, and definitely something that I've been guilty of in the past as well, is rallying others to share to their own, LinkedIn, social media, wherever it may be. But then you spend so much time doing that 2 weeks goes by, or, a month goes by, and it's like, oh, I haven't actually posted anything myself for quite a long time. But, there's every cloud has a silver lining. The silver lining is everybody else is sharing, and that's great. But you're right, you still have to kind of keep up appearances and, lead from the front, I guess. But what's next then? So obviously we know what stage you're at with your advocacy program, but what's next for the program at Procore?
So what's next that we've got in the pipeline is building out regionalized programs.
Localizing content is such a big step into this is a big proven advocacy program, in my opinion. I think that's really important, and ultimately is a huge benefit to the employees, I think, is the important thing to note there as well. When you're based in APAC, you're probably not that interested in sharing news and jobs that only associate really to the US, and vice versa. If you're in the US, you're probably not as interested in APAC, but it also gives those people that do, and there always are 5 to 10 people, no matter what business you're in, that kind of straddle both of those elements. So they want both. They want all of it. They want all the content, and others will want specific ones. So being able to filter that down, break all of that down, give people that choice, I think is a really, really good step for what's next for you.
Melissa, something that was really interesting that you said earlier was about the fact that you have to have different definitions of ROI depending on who you're speaking to. So I'm assuming, I guess, different people have different definitions of success, but what does long-term success look like for you as the person overseeing this thing?
Long-term success to me, I would say, is hearing from our teams that customers and talent, that they are arriving to those initial conversations already informed of who is Procore, what is the impact that we make, and just not losing them, not losing people, halfway through the funnel. That to me is what that success looks like. And of course, that every employee has an optimized LinkedIn profile.
Yeah, I love that. And I mean, this is always my least favorite part of the show because it's unfortunately the time where I have to bring a good conversation to a close. But I do just have a few more questions for you, Melissa. And the first one, just because I'm always curious to know, I think ideas can come from anywhere. Sometimes it's from inspiration. It might just be you've started an advocacy program because you recognize it's going to help you achieve X goal that you're already working towards. But was there another company that you saw doing this, or is there just another company that you're admiring at the moment who you think are doing a great job with employee advocacy?
Yeah, I love seeing what Eva Balakova is doing over with Danfoss, and I think right now she's actually she's kicking off a new cohort with the programming that she does, and I've suddenly got all this Danfoss posts all over my feed because she's liking and engaging on their posts, but she's doing a great job, and I pick up a lot of good nuggets from her just from the content that she shares around employee advocacy. But then there's also Alex Her over with GoDaddy. He's been a really great inspiration for me, both for employer branding and employee advocacy too. I really like the very human approach that he takes with the work that he leads over there.
It's amazing. Yeah, I've heard good things about Alex, so I definitely need to give him a follow on LinkedIn. And I'm so glad to hear you mention Eva, because even since we had her on the show, I feel like we need to get her back on just to talk about all the work that she's done since. Melissa, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today. We really, really appreciate it. Everybody listening, please go and follow Melissa on LinkedIn. And Melissa, is there anywhere else where people can keep up with you? Are you on X or anything along those lines?
No, but just good old LinkedIn.
Good old LinkedIn. That's where we like to be. But thank you very much for joining us, and thank you everybody for listening. We shall speak to you in a couple of weeks' time.
Excellent. Thank you very much for having me.